and good afternoon to in-house counsel from all across America and North America, really, because we always have a few people on from Canada and Mexico, and wherever you are, you're welcome too. And of course, if you're not in-house counsel, you're also welcome as well. Welcome to everybody. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us today, and we appreciate you for that. So thank you. And special thanks to our host today and my dear friend, Annie Little. For those of you here for the first time, let me give you a quick bit of background on In-House Connect. In-House Connect actually started 11 years ago as a New York City-based in-person meetup group for in-house counsel. Every month, In-House Connect would organize free CLE classes, which were followed by cocktail and networking receptions. And every 6 months, we would organize fun and festive networking mixers. Over the years, we've helped thousands of in-house counsel connect with peers and outside counsel alike. The group was humming along, and then, of course, COVID hit. We couldn't meet in person, so we basically took what we were doing and went online. And it's been a fantastic transition. Instead of being limited to New York City, we've been able to attract a much larger audience of in-house counsel, like I said before, from coast to coast and practically around the world. We've been able to facilitate way more networking and relationship building, and we've been able to organize fun events featuring high caliber speakers like the fantastic speaker we have today. Today's event, how to go from counsel to general counsel. Our speaker this afternoon is Annie Little. Annie is a former real estate finance lawyer turned ICF certified coach who specializes in supporting lawyers through their job searches, career transitions, and ascent to leadership positions within their organizations. She founded JD Nation in 2012 to pursue her vision of a world in which every lawyer has a fulfilling job, a humane workplace, and a life they're excited to live. Through executive coaching and career coaching, Annie strives to bring that vision to life by helping lawyers to land, lead, and succeed in their ideal jobs. Annie's coaching program, Make Your Next Move, provides lawyers with a practical process for finding and landing their ideal job. She particularly enjoys coaching lawyers through the process of identifying and effectively communicating their transferable skills and accomplishments to any employer, legal or otherwise. Annie has contributed her perspective on career development for lawyers to Law 360, Bloomberg Law, Northwestern University, Above the Law, Attorney at Work, Maryland Bar Association, Mothers Esquire, and Miss JD. You can learn more about Annie by visiting thejdnation.com and on LinkedIn. And with that, I will turn things over to Annie.
Thank you, Shai. Oh, very excited about this today, guys. So let's just get started with it. From counsel to general counsel, climbing the corporate ladder for the in-house counsel. And like Shai said earlier, even if you're not currently in-house, this will still be helpful to you. And thank you for that lovely introduction, Shai. I feel like I don't even need this slide, but I'm Annie Little, former real estate finance lawyer. I left the practice of law in 2013, but I started coaching the year before. I'm ICF certified, and just a heads up, I'm a recreational swearer. I try to be on my best manners, but sometimes something flies out. So if you're a pearl clutcher, this is your warning. All right, so here are the topics that we are going to cover today, because as you know, there's a lot that goes into becoming, that goes into becoming general counsel. So these are the four sort of areas we're going to cover, and it's really only the beginning. So the first topic we're going to cover is, do you actually want to be general counsel? It's not for everyone, so we're going to talk about how to figure out if it's right for you. And if you do decide that you want to be general counsel, you got to let people know about it. So we'll talk about how to go about doing that. The third topic is, are you general counsel material? And let me just say, anybody can be general counsel material. You just have to get the right experience. So we're going to talk about how to go about doing that. And then the last topic we will cover is how to navigate the general counsel hiring process, because it is different than probably any other interview process you've been through. And for anyone here who already is a GC, you probably know that very well. All right, let's see. Next slide, please. There we go. All right, so we're just going to jump right in to our first topic, which is looking at the general counsel role and determining if it is right for you. So let's talk about why you want to be general counsel. And I want you to be really honest about why you want the top legal job, because these reasons are valid, they're common, and they're morally neutral. So there's no judgment coming out on these, because I feel like sometimes I ask people and they feel like they need to have a more sort of like noble or lofty reason why. but you don't. So maybe it's because you want to be the boss finally, or there's the prestige element of it. It's the top job for for legal in-house, kind of like a partner in a law firm. Some GCs have really great compensation. I mean, all GCs have good compensation, and some, it's amazing. And then maybe you want to have influence in the organization that you may not have as a more junior counsel. So, like I said, these are all totally valid, great reasons, but there's more that we can dig into. And most lawyers' analysis stops here, which can lead to some problems. So let's take a deeper look at why you might want to be general counsel that goes a step further beyond these reasons. So here's the secondary analysis that I like to go into. And anyone who's worked with me knows that values I'm obsessed with values because they're so unique to who you are. And if I have you tell me what your core values are, I get to know so much about you in a really short period of time, because I get to see what's most important to you and what your motivation, like what drives your motivation. So, and for you to identify your values is also really helpful too, because the research has shown that if you have any sort of dissatisfaction with your job or your career or burnout, there's a values disconnect going on. So it might seem kind of lofty to be talking about your core values, but I always start there because it's so very telling. So with values, it's like, what's most important to you? And this is, you gotta look into this, because general counsel is a 24/7, 365 kind of role. I mean, there could be some exceptions depending on the company, but generally speaking, you are on call. You're beholden to the senior management, the C-suite executives, like you're on speed dial. And so if some of listen, you have like core values that are set from early adulthood, generally about 5 to 8 that most people have. And the priority that you place them in can vary in different seasons of your life. Like for me, family wasn't a big deal until I started my own family, because my family of origin kind of sucked. So family wasn't a big deal. So I was okay with taking jobs where I was working a lot and, but then once I had my own family became like my top core value. So this isn't to say if family is a value of yours that you shouldn't be general counsel. It's just encouraging you to take a look at where you are in your season of life, looking at where your values are prioritized and thinking honestly about if that's going to be a good fit. Because the general counsel that I know, that I've talked to, that I've coached, they're like, it's not a joke. This is a really demanding job. It's not for everyone. And they're like, it wouldn't be for me in other seasons of life. So if family is a core value of yours that's important right now, work-life balance, it's really tough to achieve in a GC position, and even autonomy, because you are, it's like you're the top like legal dog in the organization, but you're very much tethered to the schedules and agenda and priorities of the C-suite. So those are all really important to consider. And just because now may not be the right time for you to be GC doesn't mean that it's not going to fit into your lifestyle in the future. So it's just something to take inventory of, just to make sure you know what you're getting into and your expectations are aligned. Strengths. This is another area that I think is really important, and I love learning about people's strengths. And just for reference, when I talk about strengths, I don't think that it's like you have strengths and then you have weaknesses. I look at character strengths, and it shows like, top to bottom, the ones that, are your top strengths down to your not top strengths, but they're not weaknesses. I think of them as muscles. And so the ones that are most developed are the ones at the top, and it just means that they come more naturally to you. And so I like to lean into people's existing strengths. At the same time, you can build your strengths. If you want to focus on things like leadership, judgment, management, you can do that. So that's something to take inventory of, because those are some of the most important strengths that a general counsel will have to help them to be successful. You want those kinds of things to come easily to you. You want those to be like, yeah, those are some of my strengths that I can lean into. And from my experience, judgment, that's usually a top strength of every lawyer I've worked with, like top 5 or higher. Usually it's like number 1 or 2. And that's arguably the most important characteristic of a general counsel, right? You need to have exquisitely good judgment. That's why the company is relying on you. So these are the strengths that you should kind of want to strive to have at the top, but know that if you don't have them there, or maybe you have some other ones that make more sense, that's fine too. But bottom line, take inventory of what your strengths are. And interests, yes, it's actually important to know what you're interested in, because if you are going to be in this job that's very high demand, you should probably be interested in it. You should probably not hate it. You should probably have a way to make it feel somewhat easy to stay up on all the developments or to be fully immersed in this area all the time. So are you interested in business in general? How about finance? Like different GC roles have more or less finance involved. But overall, the industry that the organization is in is probably the biggest factor for you to look into. If the industry that this company works in is completely dull to you, or there's a values disconnect, like you actually don't agree with what the industry is doing, that's going to cause, to put it mildly, it's going to cause some discomfort. And it's just going to make it harder for you to do your job. So with all that goes into being a general counsel, you want to have a position where you're actually interested in it. It's like, why would you spend all this time and effort if you don't even kind of like what you're doing? So I really do want you to be honest with yourself and be like, do I really want to work in, the pet food industry? Is that something that I can get behind? Personally, I could, but other people no, thank you. I would much rather be in fintech. It's good to know. And then it also helps you to focus your career path. And then the last sort of sub-analysis that I want you to look at is, what are your career goals? And have you thought of them in more detail than just, I want to be general counsel? It's like, well, why do you want to be general counsel? What do you want to get out of your career? Do you just want to keep taking on bigger and bigger challenges? Do you want to make an impact in some way? Are you wanting to leave a legacy for your family, or for maybe it's some other sort of cause that you're really passionate about? That's what you want to consider, because is being general counsel going to help you further your career goals? And it might not, but it's important to look at, because when you've got your values, strengths, interests, and goals all aligned, that's when you're going to not only be more successful, but you're also going to be happy. And you're going to avoid burnout, because lawyering is so stressful. And I did a poll on LinkedIn, and 96% of the people who responded said that they were either currently burned out or had been burned out. 96%. So it's something that touches all of us. And being able to have an idea of what your values, strengths, interests, and goals are, and then finding jobs that are aligned with them, that's going to keep you out of burnout land. So tell me in the chat, after hearing all that, do you still want to be general counsel? And all answers are acceptable. Yes, yes, yes. Good, I love it. Depending on the role, that is such a lawyer answer, and I love it. Here for it. On the fence, good, good. Jenny, stay tuned. Someday, yes, yes. Yes, okay, this is excellent. So it looks like I've gotten you guys thinking. Okay, good, good, good. This is where I want you. We're good. All right, so let's move on to the next topic now that you're thinking about, okay, GC, I think could be for me, given the right circumstances, given the right time, given the right role. So how are we going to hunt down this role for you? Well, it's important that now that you know you want to be general counsel, that you let other people know that you want to be general counsel. Because here's the hard truth that you don't want to hear. You probably know it, but I'm just going to say it because that's what I do. No one is going to seek you out for a general counsel role. Nobody's going to come and anoint you as the chosen one to be the next general counsel for their organization out of nowhere. you've got to make your aspirations known to the right people. And I know that sounds scary, maybe, or maybe it just seems like, yeah, right, Annie, why? So let's talk about it a little more. So it's like, do they know? You need people to know that that's what you want to do, because there's a lot that goes into putting yourself in the right position to be even considered for general counsel. So there are two routes to general counsel. There's the external route. So if you're currently in an organization, you can go outside your organization to get a GC role elsewhere. And then there's also the internal route where you could be promoted internally up to that top spot. So for the external route, this involves reaching out to like specialized legal recruiters and executive search firms. And you can find these people on LinkedIn. You probably are already aware of some of these people because you might have already worked with them, or they're contacting you off and on. And you want to find the ones that do general counsel placements. And even within that, you can like niche into, people who are placing like startups or Fortune 100 or biotech, or it can get really specialized. So you want to start looking for these types of executive search professionals so that you can get on their radar, and you're not going to be pushy, and you're just going to, but you're going to make connections and you're going to build relationships with these people. And that's all there is to it. Because then they're going to know who you are. They're going to get to know you in a nice, non-pressurized way. And they're going to start to know what you're looking for. And when they see that down the road, they're going to know to reach out to you. And along with this is the advice that I give people is to take recruiters' calls, even if you're currently happy in your job. My husband is a lawyer. He literally asked me this yesterday. I was like, how do you not know this? How do you not know this? But again, this is just about, you can build relationships with recruiters. And for so many reasons, for the ones like I described above, like if you're going to be the one reaching out to recruiters, but recruiters move around and they change which areas they recruit in from time to time. So there might be somebody who's recruiting in an area that you have like no interest in, but develop a relationship. Some people, it's really easy to just genuinely form a relationship with them. And then as you guys both continue on through your careers, things change and evolve, and maybe they would be in a position to help you out when you're ready for a GC role. So be nice to the recruiters. Be nice. I know there are some bad seeds out there, but they can be really lovely and really, really can help you. Your LinkedIn profile. This is another way for following the external route. You want your LinkedIn profile to look like you're seeking a GC role. And this doesn't mean putting like seeking a GC role. It's putting out the vibe. Like that's a very technical phrase. No. But you want to be able to be popping up in the searches that recruiters are doing on LinkedIn. And so you have an idea, and you'll learn today some things that, that they are going to be looking for. But another way to help you out with this, to come up with like keywords and understanding how you want to frame your experience, is go onto websites like goinhouse.com and acc.com and look for general counsel postings and just see what type of experience they're looking for. What type of skills are they asking for? What words and phrases are coming up a lot? How does it vary depending on the industry? Which industry do you want to be in? And looking at it that way, you can reverse engineer and be like, okay, so if in this field, they're talking about general counsel and they're talking a lot about strategic planning or strategic vision. Great. First of all, I need to figure out what that is. Second of all, I need to figure out how to convey that I know how to do that on my LinkedIn profile. That's just kind of a bad example I gave there, but that's the idea of why you would seek these things out and how you can update your LinkedIn profile. So even if you're not at a point right now where you're ready to be GC, you can start cultivating your LinkedIn profile so that it positions you to show up in those search results. So that's the external route. Now, internally, let's say you think that you have a shot at being promoted to the general counsel role at some point. It's important to share that goal with your supervisors and any mentors that you have within the organization. Of course, trusted people. If there's somebody you can't trust, there's always internal politics, but you need to let people know, because they are, first of all, they're going to help you to be realistic about your chances, because there is an element of luck involved. If your timeline for GC doesn't line up with when that role is going to be opening up, it's just not going to work out internally. Nothing personal. And so you're going to be looking externally for that role probably. And it's good to have people tell you that. And it's not like, well, see you later. You can still say, I want to be GC in, 5, 10 years, 2 years, whatever it is. And you're going to say, I want to be developing the experience that's going to help me succeed and be competitive for a general counsel role. And so letting people know who can help you to find those opportunities internally is really, really important. Plus, you're going to need references when you're applying for jobs. So this is a great way to get really great references who can speak to this specific type of experience that's so valuable for GC roles. And so they're going to help you to seek out projects and ways of, getting that experience. And that is going to help you to develop your executive presence. And we will talk a little bit more about that. It's kind of like an amorphous coachy concept, but it's really important because it's one of those things where either, you can see in somebody like that person has executive presence and that person doesn't. And in the interview context, it's really as simple as that. They're like, I can't see this person as GC versus, oh, I can totally see this person as GC. So we'll talk more about this later on, but that's something to start developing now, which is basically confidence without arrogance. Never too soon to start developing that. And like I was saying, I got ahead of myself, but so you want to seek out projects. These are like cross-functional teams with like kind of messy projects, where you're going to get exposure to senior management. Because if you're going to come up internally, guess who's going to have the final say? Guess who you're going to have to get along with? You're going to be working really closely with the C-suite. So it's really, really helpful and actually very important to get yourself in front. Give yourself as many opportunities as possible to get in front of senior management and to show them what you're capable of. And we will talk more about that as well. And as you might expect, it would make sense to pursue both internal and external routes because you never know what's going to happen. So just have your bases covered. This just fits into like your overall networking and professional development career plans for yourself. All right. So tell me in the chat, are you thinking right now that you're going to go the internal route or the external route? Just based on what you know now. Of course, you can't actually know. Internal, oh, it's like a good mix. It's like alternating. I love it. I love it. Oh, that's so interesting. Both. Well, yeah, Christy, you read? Yep, there we go. I mean, and it could be preference, right? Like given a perfect set of circumstances, you would like to go internally or externally. All right. So this is really like the meat and potatoes of the presentation. This is all about becoming a general counsel before you actually have the role so that you are perfectly positioned once you get into the hiring process. So gathering the experience you need to be successful in a GC role. So these are the 6 areas that we're going to talk about. And like, just heads up, I'm not going to go into any other, I'm not going to move through a bunch of slides because these things they all kind of overlap, but this is what you should be working on as you're getting ready to go for GC, whether that's like in a year or 5 years, 10 years. Here's your professional development plan. These are the things that you need to be working on. So we'll talk about skill set, both like hard skills and soft skills, talk about how to be seen as a problem solver, because as a lawyer, of course, you're a problem solver. But as you know, if you're in-house counsel already, there really is a right way to go about it and a wrong way to go about it. Business acumen is very important. Being an active listener, we'll talk about that. strategic, you need to be a strategic planner. And we'll talk about what that means in the legal context as a general counsel. And then look, that pesky executive presence is showing up again. So these are the things that you're going to want in some way to kind of show up on your LinkedIn profile. These are the types of things that people who are hiring for general counsel are going to be looking for. And a lot of this stuff is you can't just say, right, like I have executive presence or I have the general counsel skill set. You're going to have to demonstrate it to them. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let's start with the skill set. And the hard skills are like your legal expertise, having some financial management skills, business acumen, industry experience, and cultural sensitivity is a skill that you really do need as a general counsel now, especially if you're doing any sort of international engagement. So with legal, as you know, it's general counsel, right? It's not like specific subject matter expert counsel. So you need to have sort of an ability to issue spot at a minimum in a lot of different areas like compliance and corporate governance, risk management, some employment, labor and employment, executive compensation. But what a lot of roles, not prioritize, what they value is if you have like subject matter expertise in one of those common areas that is necessary for like every GC role. So be thinking about, what you like, what you're interested in, and what would be easy for you to become a subject matter expert in, so that it's not like it's not a heavy lift for you to stay up on the new developments and want to learn more and really position yourself as this subject matter expert. So that would be areas like corporate governance, regulatory, depending on, specific to the industry you want to be in, risk management and investigations. And in some roles, even privacy can be one of those, depending on the company, of course. So if you wanted to be a subject matter expert, or if you are one, that's what you would want to highlight to them. That is what seems to be really valued in that GC role right now. And then, of course, being able to understand when there's an issue in another area of law, and whether you have subject matter experts internally or externally, that you understand how to call upon those people and to mobilize your resources to solve that problem. The financial stuff, financial, unless you have a background in business, or maybe you have an MBA or something, this is an area where you might want to take a course, like on Coursera, one of those free courses, just to get an idea of what this kind of thing looks like. Or if there are places in your current organization to learn about this. And what I'm seeing in the chat, they tend to value SEC experience. Yeah, that's a big one. Corporate and securities, for sure. They at least want you to have some, even if it's not like your number one, like subject matter expert. They want to know that you've done that kind of work and you really, really get it. That's a really great point, Sean. So with the financial management, you're going to need to understand like cost and all allocation of resources for like budgeting and forecasting, because you might be in charge of some of that stuff as GC, like a budget for your department, possibly others. You're going to need to understand like ROI, break-even analysis. And if that just sounds like Greek to you, that's an opportunity for you to seek out some education on that. And like I said, you can do like something on Coursera, or you can, maybe there's even like a CLE, like financial management for lawyers, you could take to kill two birds with one stone. Or there's a way to get that kind of exposure in your current in-house role. Business acumen, we'll go into this a little differently, but one thing that I've heard several general counsels say to me, and former general counsel, is that having some sort of like business credential actually goes a long way with like the C-suite and non-legal professionals. So even if you have an MBA, awesome. But let's say you wanted to get like an executive certificate, or you just are taking some classes, they're like, put that on your resume, put that on your LinkedIn profile, because it shows that you're trying, like you are working to gain that kind of, that kind of knowledge at least. And then your resume and your interview, you'll explain how you're implementing and, using that knowledge as your, in your experience. But it shows that you're taking an initiative and that you care. So, on the lawyer side, we might be like, well, who cares if you're just like, why would I list like a class I took or something, or like a silly certificate? Because it matters to some people, and it's important to understand what companies value, what the C-suite may value. Plus, you're going to gain a lot of knowledge about it. So that's one way to sort of easily demonstrate like a hard skill, because hard skills are your knowledge, training, education. That's, that kind of broadcasts it in an easy way. And it helps you to learn, with business acumen, we're talking about finance, accounting, statistics, marketing, and business operations. And you're going to want an understanding of all of that, because you're going to be dealing with cross-functional teams. And they're all going to be dealing in those terms and in those areas. And then with cultural sensitivity, you're going to want to be familiar with like global laws and regulations, some international legal knowledge, even if you don't know everything, but thinking of things like GDPR, you have to have an understanding of that. But DEI, that's thankfully becoming ever more important. And so that's something that you may want to talk about in your experience. It might be some sort of initiative that you want to head up in your organization to show that you have a true commitment to it. Because again, this is when it comes to like DEI stuff, it's really easy to say that you value it, but it's much harder to demonstrate that you care about it. And so that's an opportunity to do that, because it's a skill that not a lot of like old school GCs may have, but it's something that the C-suite is looking for going forward. I skipped over industry. Industry experience. When I'm working with candidates who are going into a GC role, and when I'm talking to people who are hiring for GC, the industry expertise is a really big differentiator, especially if it's a highly regulated field like financial services or like life sciences, privacy, IP, stuff like that. So you want to be able to show that like you really, really get the industry, that you really are involved. You understand the landscape. Like that's really something that is super important, because they want somebody who already understands like the broader sort of ocean that this company or organization is swimming in. And so remember, like back when I talked about like, what are you interested in? This can be really helpful in terms of like targeting. Okay, you want to be a general counsel, but in what industry, like in what capacity? Because then this gives you time to get involved in that industry. Even if your current job isn't in there, you can do a bridge job to get that experience, or you can do other things to get involved in the industry. But so those are like the hard skills. These are your credentials, your education, your training. And those are really, as you're hearing, it's pretty easy to, gain that. I mean, the industry experience could be difficult if you're not in the industry you want to be in yet, but heads up, now you need to like work on that. And then soft skills. I feel like these are things that we as lawyers tend to undervalue, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for them. And like Shai mentioned in my intro, that I'm obsessed with helping people understand their transferable skills. Because lawyers, we tend to think that, because we're so siloed in our practice areas sometimes, that we're pigeonholed and we can never do anything outside of that particular practice area or industry or whatever. But our soft skills are what help us to be transferable, because those skills are so important in any kind of job, legal or otherwise. And so the type of soft skills that, and these kind of often will overlap with strengths too, like good judgment. These are the ones that GCs absolutely need to succeed in what they really value, like good judgment, management, leadership, communication skills, collaboration, social intelligence, and along with that, empathy is becoming more and more valued, which is so, so important in the legal field, and adaptability and accountability. So those are like the top soft skills. And this is another one of those situations where you can't say, well, I have really good judgment. Like put that on your resume or just say that in an interview, like, okay. Or, oh, I'm a really good collaborator. You have to back it up with examples. And so you probably have some of, right now you already have examples of how you can communicate well, like to different audiences, whether it's talking to senior management or talking to the business side, talking to vendors. You've got examples of that. You might not have examples yet, or a lot of examples yet on management or leadership or like accountability, where like you're the one who's responsible for a lot. And so the way to get that experience is to seek out complicated projects so that you're going to be able to get your, roll up your sleeves and things will, things are a little messy. And that are also going to give you exposure to senior management. And so I've heard multiple GCs talk about this to me. It's like every company has these like messy cross-functional issues that, and they need to set up a team to solve it. So, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. I love how active you guys are in there. And so there's they're setting up a team like, oh, we got to handle this now. So if you hear about a team that's being, they're like, oh, we need to put together a team to deal with like a new records retention policy, something boring like that. There's probably more exciting things. That's just what's coming to mind for me. You could ask to be like, when you hear about them wanting to start something like that, you can put your hand up and say, hey, I'll be the legal rep on that team. I'd love to do that, the legal side of that. Even better yet, if, once you're feeling comfortable, you want to kind of put yourself out there, take a little bit of a risk, you can ask to head it up. You can say, oh, I would love to lead the new record retentions policy. I want to be the one to help revise that and streamline it and get these, hit these, metrics that we're looking for. And if you head it up, that you're definitely going to be needing to make presentations or have meetings with senior management. So you're going to get on the radar. And I see it's difficult to know when those opportunities are out there. You can also look yourself. So, and this is a way for you to, I say play around, but I mean, it's an example of being strategic and understanding what's going on in your organization. Because we've all been there where we're like, this process runs so poorly, And so looking at, well, what are some areas, cross-functional where I can show that I'm able to work across, different teams. And, what's something that needs to be fixed, and you can propose that. And again, how you go about doing that will vary from organization to organization, but that's like one more example where you can say, I took the initiative and saw this problem and put together a team to solve it. So that's another, so I understand it's trickier, but it's also a really great opportunity to show that you have that sort of like leader, that slant for like leadership, and you like to take, we always say like, we like to take on a challenge. That's a really great example of that. Yeah. Okay. So you can call it, there's different stakes. So there's kind of like, you hear about a team like that's getting put together. And again, this, it's hard to know when these things are coming about. Be talking to people within your organization, trusted people. Hopefully you have at least one person that you can talk to about your aspirations and say, I want to get this kind of experience because eventually I want to be general counsel and I want to be able to develop those skills while also, helping our organization right now. And so talking to those people, they're going to be able to help you to know when those sorts of opportunities are coming up. And then you can put your hand up and say, oh, I'll be legal on that. Or better yet, you can say, I'll head up that project so that you can be really at the forefront of it. But it's okay. I don't want you to be too comfortable. You can stretch a little bit, but you don't want to be paralyzed and be, operating from a place of fear. So if it really feels like scary just to raise your hand to do legal, to be the legal person on the team, do that. That's a great place to start. And then if you're having trouble figuring that out, another really sort of like kind of scary, but also exciting thing is to look at the organization and look at some of the problems that are going on that could be fixed. And you can, it's up to you to figure out how like, narrow or broad that project could be. And that's all part of it. That's all part of it. And I know as lawyers, we don't want to make mistakes and it's scary and you're like, I don't want to mess it up. But it's okay. They're not going to let you take on a project that's going to like destroy the company. So that's probably one of the biggest resume builders, if you will. This is like a great way to get experience, but it involves talking to people, letting them know so that they can bring you into those projects. And it's so much harder if you're someone from like a traditionally marginalized population, if you're a woman, to get in there. So I'm not going to lie, it does take additional effort, but it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile. And it's a really great way to succeed in your current role and to build up your future GC chops. All right. So in terms of being a problem solver, all lawyers are problem solvers, but we need to be cognizant of the perception of lawyers. For those of you that are in-house already, you know that a lot of people think of lawyers as like deal blockers and naysayers. I represented banks and closing government guaranteed loans. And so they would get mad at me, like the sales team, they would get mad because I'd say, like, we can't close this loan tomorrow because we have all these like government regs we have to like comply with. But saying it that way, like got people so angry. Whereas if I was like, okay, listen, I think the soonest we can get this closed is Tuesday. Okay, so that's like 4 business days from now. I know you'd like to get it closed tomorrow, but I think we can get it done Tuesday if we do X, Y, and Z. So you're not saying like, no, you can't close it. You're saying, all right, you want to close it as soon as possible. I'm with you. Here's how I see us being able to close as soon as possible, even though that's probably not going to be tomorrow. So it's coming from that place of yes, of being like, someone comes to you with a problem and instead of being like, oh God, no, you can't do it that way. And saying like, yes, I see that you want to do that. And I think we can work something out. It just lands totally differently, like which you guys already know. And coming from a place of yes, and kind of prioritizing a spirit of collaboration where it's like, it's not just me, legal, who's doing this. It's, I'm going to be working with you and you and I are going to help each other to get this across the finish line in the way that you want to. So that's, I'm trying to think, I'm looking at my notes. So, because some people will say to me, well, I don't want to be a yes person. I don't want to be like a rubber, and that's not what we're talking about here, right? Like we're still saying like, no, we're not going to do it that way. So it's not a rubber stamp. It's not oh yes, sure, we'll do that. Yes, we'll do that. And then like writing a CYA to the file or something. It's just overcoming that perception that lawyers are quick to say no, or that lawyers think that they know better than the business side, because as you guys know, we're seen as like totally separate from the business and not really getting it. And whether or not that's true, it's a perception we need to be aware of and to overcome. And we talked about business acumen a little bit when we were talking about hard skills and how you can sort of broadcast that with like talking about like courses you've taken or certificates you've gotten, if you have an MBA, that kind of good stuff. But in a more meaningful way, business acumen is having an understanding of the industry that you're in, inside and out. And like I said, this is a big differentiator for candidates going up for GC roles. That the people I've worked with, if they're like really like dialed into the industry and they have a lot of contacts and they've been in it for a long time and they can really talk shop, that's going to be better than someone who's like, oh yeah, like I'm really interested in this industry, but I really want to break into it, that like, and those are two really like extreme examples, but just to give you an idea, they're going to want someone who already really gets the industry, because it's going to be that much easier for them to understand. They feel like for you to understand the business. And really, you can, a kind of a shorthand when you're kind of not sure about this is to think, well, don't they care about the legal stuff? Of course they care about the legal stuff, but law school taught you how to figure out all the legal problems, right? The business side, you've really got to continue to stay up on it. You've got to be involved. You've got to be really into it and prioritizing all things business, at least perception-wise, over the legal, because nobody wants to hear you talk about the legal side. They're just assuming that you're going to get that done. So having that business acumen is understanding the industry, understanding competitors, understanding the products, the services, understanding everybody else's, like how the company is situated in the broader industry, and talking, leading with that kind of understanding as opposed to like legal minutia. So that's sort of the softer side of business acumen when you're wanting to communicate that you have it, is especially in an interview. Like if you can use their language and reflect it back to them, it just feels familiar. And that really resonates with people. And you can see that in job postings too. You can get a sense of how they talk and what words, because people will, some people will say client, some people will say customer. And it's important for you to pick up on those nuances and reflect it back. Because if you say something different, it's going to be jarring to them. This is really little things. So this is for both interviews and just, in your day-to-day when you're talking to people across your organization. So business acumen, then we've doubled up on that. So the ask and listen, this is another area where it's really valuable to have the skill, in the job, of course, but it's also something that employers are looking for when they're hiring a general counsel and in-house counsel as well. Because again, we have to be conscious of the perception of lawyers as being know-it-alls, that we talk at people, that we talk down to people, or that, they think that we love to hear ourselves talk. And okay, maybe we do, maybe not. But the bottom line is that people want to feel heard. I mean, think of like lawyers want to feel heard too. We feel very misunderstood. And so just I bring that up so you can have some empathy for people. And some people are nervous around lawyers. Some people have had bad experiences with lawyers. And so think of them as like eggshell plaintiffs, right? You don't know where they're coming from. Just assume that they've heard all the stereotypes about lawyers, and it's your job to not fall into those stereotypes. And it's not going to be hard because you're not one of those people. You are not one of those stereotypes. So this is what they want, what they like when they do like research and like studies on this stuff. What people, non-legal professionals within an organization have to say about their legal team is that they're like, I just don't feel like they're asking me about what my problem really is. And this is something that lawyers, we kind of struggle with anyway, but, clients, it's saying like, well, they think they know the best answer, but I don't feel like they've actually asked me all the questions. I don't feel like they actually understand what I need. So that's really important. I bring this also up so that you can start thinking about experience that you can communicate on your resume like this, because it's a little harder to kind of think of. But it's a type of situation where you go in and you assume something's going to be one way, but you ask questions and you realize, oh my gosh, it's completely different than what I thought. And that's where you can really generate that trust that the business side needs to have in its legal. So keep that in mind. Oops. Sorry, spazzed out. All right, so strategic planner. This is, you're always hearing about like, oh, strategic vision and all that kind of good stuff. I'm like, well, what does that even mean? And this is more than anything about being able to anticipate legal issues, because nobody else is really thinking about legal. So anticipate legal issues like regulations that are on the horizon. And that's like the easiest example I can think of. So that like there's a regulation that is about to be approved or could be approved. Even before it gets to that point, it's your job. It's the GC's job to see that and be like, okay, legal department, we need to be tracking this, and we need to put together like a plan for in the event that this is passed. How is this going to impact our organization? Okay, here's how it impacts it. What does that mean on a day-to-day? What are we going to have to do? And setting up a way to implement it in a seamless way so that in the event that a regulation goes into effect, it's not like a scramble, like, oh my gosh, like, what do we do? How do we manage this? Like, you have given the company a bunch of lead time. We're like, well, we expect this to go into effect in 2 months. And here's the plan that we have that we've come up with to help implement the necessary changes to make sure that we stay in compliance. That's exactly what they're talking about with a strategic planner. It's being able to see into the future and putting together plans and giving the company lead time before like a change or like an issue or a problem. You want to be the person that's able to see the big picture, see out ahead, and then plan. So that's another thing that you can think about. Like, even in like, if you're trying to find one of these issues like cross-functional, messy, sort of complex problems that you could either head up or be the legal rep on, identifying what those can be, what sort of those problems are. That's strategic planning. That's understanding like, ooh, we have a problem here. This is a big, looking at it from a big picture, this is a problem. I'm going to look at it now on like a closer level and solve that problem for the organization. And then here's that pesky executive presence again. And this just kind of sums up everything we've been talking about. You want to be confident, but not arrogant. You need to be seen as a trusted expert and advisor, but along with that comes with you not being condescending. All right. And this is just kind of the takeaway for like what I feel like trusted advisor really says. It's the Maya Angelou reminder where she tells us that, she's learned that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's really true. So tell me in the chat, which skills do you think you need to develop? Anything in particular? Anything that feels particularly scary? Or do you feel like you're kind of on track? Yeah, the finance stuff tends to be the one. But now you know. All right. And just the last section, this is the landing the job part. And this is where I've helped a lot of people get the GC job. And if you've ever interviewed for GC, you know that it is unlike any other sort of process. And so here's just the general like navigation, the things to keep in mind. You want to keep your expectations in line because it's a really long time frame. And it's even longer on their side than it is on yours, but it's about, 4 months is like probably about average from beginning to end. And think about relocation because there are so few general counsel roles in comparison to other roles that if you don't want to relocate, make sure that any like recruiter knows that you're not willing to relocate because that's just going to limit your options. And that's totally fine, right? Different seasons, different times are okay for that. And it's perfectly okay to say, I'm not in a position to relocate. It'll just limit the opportunities that are available to you, depending on where you are. And as far as interviews, there are so many rounds, so many rounds. You've got like your recruiter screening interview, you've got the first round interview, second round, you might have to do some sort of presentation or meet with the business side, a bunch of business teams, like multiple people to see how you communicate with everyone. The third round or more, it's like you're meeting with the CEO because you need to be compatible with them. Fourth round or later round, you're going to meet with a board member. They're going to want to understand what your understanding is of corporate governance and you're going to want to know like, so where do I fit in? Am I supposed to be like this ethics watchdog, or is it more like business judgment type stuff? Like, where do I fit in? And so you're going to want to prep all kinds of answers to the questions that come up with that they could potentially come up with. And you're going to want to be asking them a lot of questions too, to make sure that it's the right fit for you. And then the offer comes, and compensation for GCs is a whole thing. And then there's negotiation, which I've also helped people with. And so in like the 1 minute we have left, here are some best practices for the GC hiring process. When a recruiter reaches out to you, it's a two-way thing. Gather a bunch of information from them to make sure it's the right move, and also share, be upfront with them. Like, I'm not willing to relocate. This is the compensation range type deal that I'm looking at. This is the reporting structure I'm familiar with. I'm not going to report to a CFO, things like that. Also, once you're involved, once you've had the screening, don't pressure the recruiter. Don't be hounding them. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of people involved in a GC hiring process, and the recruiter is involved like they get paid when they place somebody. So if you're in the running, they're going to be reaching out to you. And in that same vein, don't circumvent the recruiter or use back channels. That can really backfire. And actually, if you do know people within the organization, share that with the recruiter at the beginning. When you're gathering info from them and sharing info, be like, oh yeah, like I've worked with them, or I used to represent that organization, or I know this person here or in that department. That's when that can come up. And then they can, tag those people if it makes sense. But going around and doing back channeling once the process is started, not a good look. And then you're going to want to do a deep dive on the company and, of course, the industry to prepare. I mean, you're going to be pulling like financials, if they're public, like everything you can get, analyst reports. You want to know all about their competitors and what their critics are saying about them. You're also going to want to watch, and this kind of goes into which questions to ask and which ones not to ask. There are questions that you should that you'll want to ask the recruiter that you shouldn't ask during the interview. Like, hey, what do people think of the CEO here? Or like, what's the culture like? Like, what's the perception? And then, knowing what questions to ask is like the ones that are going to give you the information that you need to understand if the role's right for you. And obviously, to avoid the ones that are about like, oh, is it like a 9-to-5 work day? And what's the comp? And what are the benefits? That comes at the end. They'll give you an offer with all that. And the last thing is prep your references. References are so super important. And if you're doing those, if you're seeking out those projects, those cross-functional teams that you're going to be leading and working on, you're going to be getting a lot of great references. And think of it as like going to college. You need like really stellar references. And that's it. And if you got a minute, tell us what the most surprising thing you learned today was. And then awesome. Q&A.
Yeah, awesome. So first of all, thank you so much for delivering such an amazing presentation, chocked full of great advice, insights. In my experience, you should treat every interaction with a recruiter, if it's internal, external, as really being part of the interview. In my opinion, are on the clock right with every interaction. So, keep that in mind. Every in-house counsel has to be dialed into the business like that. There's no excuse. You need to build relationships, and if you don't have that relationship, then you have to start like ASAP. There's just, that's just comes with the territory. So, if you're not hearing about new initiatives, or, if you're in the dark about some things, ask around, get lunch with people, and inquire as to what's happening in the business. And you'll be flooded with opportunities to participate, just from my experience again. So I have some questions that are loaded up. If you have other questions, put it into the chat, and and I'll feed that to Annie, and afterwards we'll do a little bit of virtual networking. So the first question, from Sumit. He is the only in-house counsel in his organization, and he's wondering, how do I move up? Do you have any advice for Sumit?
So is there not a GC, and like you want to become the GC? Is that? Yeah. Well, you're going to have to start putting together a case for why they need a GC, and then why you're the perfect person for it. And to be clear, I've helped people do that before, where literally somebody like on the streets of New York, it was somebody they had networked with many years ago, but they were like, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm like looking for a job. And they're like, no kidding. Like my organization, we're about to, hire our first legal person. It's like, no kidding. He's like, yeah, well, why don't you just write up a job description, for what you would want to do. And so I was like, you're going to write a GC job description, right? And he's like, yeah, right. I'm like, well, that's what you wanted. That's what we've been looking for you. So do it. And so again, this would be in figuring out, you have the advantage of being inside the organization. So how it operates, and you could see, okay, what would the top legal person be doing here? Like knowing what a general counsel does. And then going through the slides that I was showing, talking about the strategic planning and showing this is what I've done in the past. Remember when I did that? Let's do more of that. And also, if you're the only person, you're going to want to be able to make a case for bringing on support eventually, whether that's like a paraprofessional or, but having like a timeline for that. I just helped somebody go be GC at a startup. And we were talking about the comp package, and I was like, wait, you're not getting any support yet? I was like, you need to, up the comp for that, or have a discussion about timeline for that. So you really, this is going to be a really great exercise in strategic planning for you to think about, what does a general, like, how can my organization benefit from a general counsel? And what would that look like? And then putting that together and then seeing which, like if there are any gaps in your experience that you can fill, and you can target those areas. And then once you've kind of got all the pieces of the puzzle together, you basically make a presentation in some fashion. Does that make sense, Shai? What do you think?
Yeah. I think that sounds great. Honestly, better advice than I would have come up with. But yeah, I definitely know it's a challenge if you're the only lawyer there, but it's also, a great opportunity if you're, you really just have to be a partner to the business, learn the business, be a trusted advisor, be indispensable. It's probably, if I were to guess, and this is just a guess, it's probably easier to get a GC role if you're the one lawyer in the company as opposed to, one of many. Although again, I've seen some people said internal promotions are a dead end. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think I've seen plenty of GCs who got elevated to that role they were there forever, and then they got the call one day. So you never know how it's going to come and go.
Prepare for both. You really can't go wrong, because you're getting on the radar in the right ways and really developing those references. I think that's something that can come as a surprise. You're like, oh crap, I need references.
Yes.
like especially if you have someone in like senior management who can give you a reference, that's ideal. Which is like, how am I going to get that?
It's so the next question we have for public company GC roles, my friend Sean Sethna asked this, and we had some great back and forth, but he's basically asking, like SEC experience is very important. And we kind of touched on this for a quick second, but would you have any advice for how lawyers can get SEC experience?
That is a tough one, because honestly, when I work with people and they're like, I don't have SEC experience, and it's generally because they don't want it. And so it definitely takes them out of the public, a lot of the public roles. But it's one of those things where I hate this, but it's like, if it's something that you're interested in, you will have gotten that experience. You will have found ways, because I find it's one of those things that people avoid like the plague. Like if they don't want it, they're like, nope, no securities. Like, no, even people who are like very into corporate, And so what we do in those instances is you want to talk about at least your knowledge of it. So get some, you could get a certificate in some sort of thing, or you could take some classes or CEEs, CLEs or whatever, just to at least explain that you understand it, even if you don't have that experience. And then how you would, if in the GC role, how you would handle those types of issues. You'd be like, I would be drawing on subject matter experts here, or our external, here's how I've dealt with it in my other roles. I've gone to outside that, I handle all this stuff. And then we have outside counsel do that, because I like to talk about GC, like as people come in and they're interviewing, everybody has their own little bundle of like skills. And so, yes, public, they're like, ideally you would have that SEC securities experience on your own. But if you can come in and make a compelling case as to why it's okay that you don't have that, because you do other things that they might have farmed out before or were unable to do internally before, they might be like, oh, hadn't thought of that. But yeah, there's no reason why we can't do that. So that's how we deal with it. But and as far as getting the experience, it's really hard to get that experience unless you work at the SEC or you're working in that specific, like in a securities practice group. But you can always get the education and then show that you understand, you can issue spot, and then marshal the necessary resources.
Got that. So we have a few more questions, and if there are another question just came in the chat, I'm going to add it. But this is kind of like a final call for questions. But this next question is a really fantastic one, and it's about resumes. Is a GC resume different than the typical resume? We haven't talked about that so much. Do you have like some tips to share on that front?
Yeah. So, it kind of depends on what you think a typical resume is, of course, because, you know, everybody kind of has their own sort of idea for how it is. But general, like as long as we're talking about like legal resumes, I tend to think of in-house resumes being a little different than like like the law firm resume is like the boring vanilla, blah, blah, blah. You just put it in like the old order, no formatting, no nothing, or no special formatting, because they're looking for what they want. They know where to find it, done. And that still applies for general counsel. You want it to be very clear, but I do think it's important to have like a brief, like very brief, like summary type statement at the top that where you're basically saying, I'm the GC for this role. You know, like looking at the job description, talking to the recruiter, looking at the organization and seeing what's most important to them. That's the stuff you're going to highlight up there. And because you probably have a lot of skills that are going to be helpful. You have a lot of experience that's going to be helpful. At the resume stage, you want to be really pulling on, you know, spotlighting the stuff that they are most concerned about, excited about, talking about the most. Because when they're scanning stuff, those are the words they're going to be looking for. But aside from that, you know, so like, and I don't want a paragraph because eyes gloss over paragraphs, but it's a great way to like show how much time you've spent in that industry and, you know, basically saying, I'm the GC. And then I always talk about it also as like a movie trailer. And so it's like, it's just a preview. Like, this is what you're going to get when you look at the rest of my resume. So you want to make sure I write that last, because you want to make sure that if you're talking about a rom-com up here, you don't come down to the resume and it's a horror film. You know, you want to make sure that it's lining up. And then again, sometimes it can be helpful to break out your experience under your different roles by those specific skills that they're looking for. So if they're like really hammering on like, they probably wouldn't say this, but like strategic planning or something like that, you would like make that as like a bolded sort of like subheader and give your experience for where you've done strategic planning and just break it out that way. So you're really just saying, oh, these are the 3 things that are most important because I've highlighted them in the job description and the recruiter told me that's what you really want. And I know people who work there. Bam, here's my very specific experience, accomplishments where you're saying, this is what I did. These are the results I got for these companies, for these clients. And they're able to be like, well, that's exactly what we need. That's exactly it. And then when you come in for the interview, it's not about them, you know, grilling you to see if you can do the job. You've already crossed that threshold. That's when you can start to talk more about like what sets you apart, your additional skills and soft skills. So the resume itself, it's still pretty standard, but I've had a lot of success with my clients who, instead of just putting bullet points just underneath, just having like an additional set off with like the very specific type of skills or expertise or experience that they're looking for, so that it's just spotlighting exactly the right stuff. And you can do that for all your resumes, but it's especially important for GC.
On the topic of resumes, let's transition to LinkedIn. I kind of feel like resume and LinkedIn, they just like move together. But how should one manage their LinkedIn profile when they're trying to customize the resume for specific opportunities?
I heard you. So yes, they are. It's interesting because they're very like LinkedIn and the resume are related. Just as a side note, don't put your resume on LinkedIn for people to pull, because you do, like Shai said, you really do want to be able to customize your resume for a particular role. But your LinkedIn profile is going to be this sort of general type of resume. And so that's why it's really important when I work with people on this to get clear on what you want your profile to do. What type of job are you targeting? What type of jobs do you want to come up in search results for when a recruiter is typing that in? So industry is probably going to be important because you can put the words for your particular industry in there, or if like you're into privacy, because that's really what matters. Because you can put in specifics under your experience, that's fine, but especially in your headline, you know, like you'll see people put it, like mine says like lawyer career coach, and then there's like a bar, and like executive coach, and then bar, ICF certified. These are the things that people will type in and I'll show up in the search results. And so if you're looking for like, you want to be GC in like fintech, you want to put like fintech in there, and you're going to want to put like legal counsel, and you're going to want to put whatever your strengths are, like what is it about you that someone would want, what's your special sauce or whatever. And understanding what those keywords are. And a good way of doing that is looking at job descriptions for GC. So just going to like acc.com or goinhouse.com and see what are the things that they're asking for. What are some of those keywords? Because to me, that's the only time that keywords are really useful. Like in resumes, it's only as useful as what they're putting in the job description, and using their language. So on LinkedIn, you're going to want to be a little more general, just to be thinking about, well, what is somebody going to type in to a search, but also make sure that your about section is filled out. And that's the part that nobody wants to do. And even mine's filled out. It's not great. The cobbler's children don't have shoes, but you got to have something in there. And that's another area where recruiters will look. They look like in the headline and they look in the about section. So you want in there to be talking about the type of like experience you have and what you want to be doing. So you want to be conveying like that you want, because you're probably not going to be able to say, I want to be GC, because you're probably in a current role and that's weird. But and let's not go ahead and put it in there. Like if maybe you're a current GC, but you want to be putting forth like, this is the type of, like any sort of business acumen stuff you've got. You want to be putting forth any sort of strategic, big picture work that you've done, those cross-functional teams that you've worked on or led. You want to be talking about that. That's the type of stuff that you like to do, because then they're going to say, oh, well, that's what this role entails. Boom, this person would be good. So talking about, this is what I love to do. This is what I love about my job. These are the types of, companies I like to work with. These are the types of deals I like to handle. And so that's the kind of stuff you can put in your about section, but it should not be a regurgitation of your experience section or your resume. So
yeah, that makes total sense. I just want to echo a very useful tip I've employed is, if there's a job post you're interested in, definitely mirror the language as much as you can. Obviously, don't lie, but mirror the language is a winning strategy. Since the pandemic, there are a lot of GC roles posted as remote. What is your thoughts on a fully remote GC role?
I just helped somebody land one of those. So it's more, I mean, I guess I would wonder is if you have concerns about a remote role or what the deal is, but it's really about understanding what you need as like a person and a professional. So for some people, like they're like absolutely 100% remote is that's the only thing I want to consider. And that's what I want to do. But I have a chunk of clients who are also like I like being able to work remotely sometimes, but for me, I gotta be around people, I've got to be in there, like, especially if, geographically speaking, it's like, I want to at least be in the same time zone or just have that opportunity. And what a lot of organizations will do for the remote roles is they'll have people fly out for like a week every quarter or something like that. Or like at the beginning when they're onboarding, they'll have them come out for a week or two, put them up so they can develop those relationships. But I've also found that when it's any kind of remote role, but especially like a GC role, is that's a big part of the interview process, is seeing how you can connect with people like over Zoom, over the phone. Like, are people feeling like you're a part of the team, even though, they may not meet you for months or ever in person. And so I think a lot of it comes, and that's something that if you are interviewing for a role like that, you need to know for yourself. You need to do that inventory on like the values, the strengths, interests, all that, and your goals to understand what is it about a remote job that you don't like or that worries you, and come up with ways to craft questions during the interview process where you can get some insight into that. So instead of being like, well, am I going to be cut out of all the good decisions, important decisions, because I'm just not in the room? You can say, I found that I really thrive and I consistently exceed expectations when I'm included in, big strategic decisions. When I'm excluded from those for whatever reason, I have a much harder time, What opportunities would I have to be involved in those kinds of conversations and those kinds of decisions as a remote GC? So that's just like an example. You just need to know what's important to you, and then you craft the questions to get some insight into it to alleviate whatever fears or concerns you might have about a remote role. But the people that I've worked with who have landed those roles, they're very happy with them, and it was what they wanted, a remote role. So far so good from what I can tell.